Hotel. Welcome back to Matthew Daniels TV. I am your host, Matthew Daniels, the greatest author of all time. And I stand on that 16 published books. We back with the Declassified Dr. King Assassination FBI files. We done made it up to part 5, family. Like I said, I'm putting this down for National Black History Month. We're going to go through these documents and we're going to have everything on record. But today, family, I have to start off with the correction. Oh yes, as a man, when you make a mistake and you realize that you made a mistake, what do? What do, family? You correct it. I said something that was incorrect in a previous video in this series. So now I'm going to begin this video off by correcting it, doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. So give me just 1 second. Oh, and after I correct it, we're getting right back into the declassified files. And some of the information that we're going to go over today is going to blow your mind. It's going to blow your mind. I know a lot of this information is information that none of you have heard before, but guess what? A lot of it is information that I have never heard before. This is like a reaction video. I'm reading this stuff in real time. Yes, I started to read the documents before I made part 1. I scanned over a few of the pages and I was going to read through it in its totality and set up PowerPoint presentations to talk about it. But I said, you know what? I want to just go over this with the people. I want to see some of this information and hear some of this information for the first time with the people. So that's what I'm doing. All right, give me just a second right now. I'm making sure the volume is good. Making sure the picture is good. Okay, so the screen share is working. The volume is working. You guys can hear me. So let's get right off into it. First, we're going to get into the correction. And then we're going to get into the documents. We're going to pick up where we left off in part 4. Now, in a previous video, I told you guys about a guy named Reverend Malcolm Blackburn. We saw the name Reverend Malcolm Blackburn as someone who was at Claiborne Temple. And it was exposed in the documents that he was working for the police. And me assuming that Dr. King, while in Memphis, was going to the African-American churches, I erroneously assumed that Reverend Malcolm Blackburn was an African-American pastor. Well, that's not true. It is true that he was working with the police and the government, but it's not true that he was African American. In fact, Reverend Malcolm Blackburn at Claiborne Temple was a white man. That's the correction that I need to make. Now, I'm pretty sure that there were black people who were working with the federal government, but Reverend Malcolm Blackburn was not. And I did a little digging. And what I found out, family, is that not only was Reverend Malcolm Blackburn working with the police, he was an integral part of the sanitation worker strike and subsequently the civil rights movement. You see, sometimes what the federal government does when they are working to destabilize a movement or infiltrate a movement, they put people in positions who are low level, right? If you're organizing a march, they're going to have people out there marching that are working with the police and the government. But what they also do is they put people in leadership positions of these movements that are compromised. So what we're going to see with this sanitation worker strike, Reverend Malcolm Blackburn was not a small fish in a big pond. He was a big fish in a small pond. And sometimes those who are working for the police and the government are influential figures. Now, Reverend Malcolm Blackburn was the pastor at Claiborne Temple, and the majority of the parishioners were white. And he made the decision to open up his church for individuals that wanted to be involved in the civil rights movement and individuals that wanted to be involved with the sanitation workers strike that was going on in Memphis. Now, the picture that you see on your screen, I want you to look at that. Whether you're aware of it or not, in your conscious mind, your subconscious has no doubt seen this image or images like it. Within the civil rights movement, which you will see black men marching with signs that says, "I am a man." Now, this slogan for signs, watch this. This slogan started with the sanitation worker strike in Memphis, the same strike that Dr. King was working on when he was assassinated. Now, these signs were first printed up in the basement of Claiborne Temple, where the white Reverend Malcolm Blackburn was the pastor. He was instrumental in the slogan, "I am a man," and putting it on signs. And now we know that Reverend Malcolm Blackburn was working with the police. What is the takeaway from this? The takeaway is sometimes, and we have to accept this, even the slogans that we use in our marches and protests come from the people who want to subjugate us, the rallies and the protests. It makes me think about this recent Black Lives Matter campaign. Who came up with the phrase Black Lives Matter? How much do we know about them? Who was the first company to start printing up the signs? Who made the most money off the phrase Black Lives Matter? Could it be that Black Lives Matter as a slogan came from the very people that were being protested? Because for a fact, and I'm about to prove it to you, the slogan "I am a man" came from a man who was working with the police to set up Dr. King. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about, and then we're going to get back into the files. Let's start here. Now, throughout the FBI files, if you've been following this series, I mentioned the Claiborne Temple often because it was two main places that Dr. King visited when he went to Memphis. One of them was Claiborne Temple, and one of them was Mason Temple. Okay, one of them was Claiborne Temple, and one of them was Mason Temple. Now, at Claiborne Temple, we have documented in the FBI files that Reverend Malcolm Blackburn pulled undercover detective Reddit, who was assigned to watch Dr. King. Blackburn pulled Reddit to the side and said, "Hey, Reddit, I think your cover is blown. Someone is going around saying that they saw you in fire station number 2 with binoculars watching Dr. King at the Lorraine Motel. You might want to get out of the church because everybody is starting to talk about it." So we see proof positive that Blackburn was working with the police and trying to help the police. So look, let's look at a little bit of information about the Claiborne Temple, and let's see how it connects to Blackburn. Look what it says. Claiborne Temple, formerly Second Presbyterian Church, is a historic place in Memphis, Tennessee, United States. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1979 for local architectural significance. It was upgraded to national significance under Claiborne Temple in 2017 due to its role in the events of the sanitation workers' strike 1968. The historic structure was sold to the AME Church in 1949, which named the building after their bishop. That's where we get the name Claiborne Temple from. It's named after a bishop. Now, I did do a video a while back about the origins of the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and its founder, Reverend Bishop Allen. So if you're interested in the history of that, you can scroll my channel and find that. But look what it says about the civil rights movement. Throughout the 1960s, Claiborne Temple became the city's staging ground for the civil rights movement. In Memphis, the link between racial and economic injustices in the city became increasingly apparent. Memphis labor unions had tried for years to reform Memphis public works policies that included discrimination, unfair working conditions, and drastically insufficient wages. The deaths of two city sanitation workers, E. Cole and Robert Walker, on February the 1st, 1968, united the sanitation workers, labor unions, religious communities, and the Black middle class to work together and create a grassroots movement in Memphis. So it's just like we said, Claiborne Temple was involved. Look, check this out. We're going to start right here. In March 1968, after weeks of marching to City Hall from Claiborne Temple, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came to Memphis in support of the sanitation workers' efforts. He had been invited by Reverend Lawson and COME to shine a national spotlight on their efforts in the fight for economic justice. Dr. King and organizers of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, helped to gain a strategic march with Dr. King leading the way. Now, let me show you guys how Reverend Malcolm Blackburn, who we saw in the files, is connected to Claiborne Temple. Check this out. Look, in this article, it says, most people who want to understand the civil rights movement in Memphis do not visit Claiborne Temple. They visit the National Civil Rights Museum, the site of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The museum is both a memorial and a stunning centerpiece to all information on the movement. Claiborne Temple, however, was the place where the Memphis movement was incubated and hatched. That's important. Listen, Claiborne Temple, however, was the place where the Memphis movement, the sanitation workers' strike, was incubated and hatched. I keep telling you guys that I believe the sanitation workers' strike was ultimately orchestrated by the government as a guise to get Dr. King to Memphis to assassinate him. Look, in 1968, when Dr. King came to Memphis to help the workers in the sanitation strike, the wheels of the movement were already turning at Claiborne. Claiborne Temple sits at the corner of Hernando and Pontotoc Streets, just off of Linden Avenue. In the 60s, its proximity to Beale Street, downtown, and public housing made it an ideal location for sanitation workers to meet and organize the sanitation strike, and for the strikers to muster before their marches to City Hall. The church's white, here we go, the church's white Canadian minister, Reverend Malcolm Blackburn, opened the church to use for these purposes. And Claiborne Temple, with its all-black congregation, became the workhorse location during the Memphis movement. Reverend Blackburn owned a small printing press that he kept in the basement of the church. It was Blackburn who printed the I Am a Man signs. that became the icon of the strike and later to the American Civil Rights Movement. In fact, the slogan has since been used the world over by other demonstrators for civil rights. So now we see the connection between Reverend Malcolm Blackburn and Claiborne Temple. Claiborne Temple is instrumental in the in beginning the sanitation worker strike. Reverend Malcolm Blackburn is instrumental in printing up the I am a man signs that became the icon of the strike, like on the thumbnail. And Reverend Malcolm Blackburn was definitely working with the police. We saw it in the FBI files. But not only was he working with the police, not only was he white, not only was he associated with Claiborne Temple, he was also Canadian. I'm going to say it one more time. He was also Canadian. Remember, we read in the files when James Earl Ray escaped from prison, within 3 months, he had went and made it all the way to Canada. And he spent a significant amount of time in Canada before coming back to the United States. Now, I don't know the connection between James Earl Ray and Reverend Malcolm Blackburn because they could have been two separate cogs in a bigger machine. But it is interesting. It is interesting that the man who they say assassinated Dr. King, when he escaped from prison, he went straight to Canada. And then we have this Reverend Malcolm Blackburn, who is instrumental at his church in kicking off the sanitation worker strike and making the slogan that was an icon of the sanitation worker strike also being Canadian. What are the odds? A Canadian minister working for the police to take down Dr. King, and the man who they say assassinated Dr. King escaping from prison and going to Canada. There's a link right there in Canada, right? Now, if you look on your screen, this is Malcolm Blackburn right here. I know it's small on your screen. It's kind of hard to blow up because this document. Look, this is from the University of Memphis University Libraries, and it's in their collection of images for the sanitation worker strike 1968. Look, Reverend Malcolm Blackburn in front of Memphis City Hall, 1968. Now, he's standing in front of City Hall talking to the police right here. Right here. Now, of course, if you're organizing a strike, you're marching on City Hall, of course, there may be pictures of you talking to the police. You could be talking about anything. You could be trying to, negotiate. But since the FBI files has exposed him as working with the police, then this picture right here becomes very, very suspect. Now, in history, Reverend Malcolm Blackburn is looked at as a certified supporter of the civil rights movement, but he's not. And in the documents, the FBI files, we exposed that he's not. And look at that black guy over his shoulder. Look at him cutting his eyes. He looked at that camera like, oh snap, they got me on tape. I wonder what his name is. Then you got a cop. Then you got another man standing next to him, looking looking like Winston Churchill over here. This guy looking like Winston Churchill from Britain. But that's Reverend Malcolm Blackburn. So that's the correction that I wanted to start off with. Reverend Malcolm Blackburn wasn't black, but he definitely was an informant, and it lends more credibility to the idea that the sanitation worker strike in Memphis was orchestrated to get Dr. King to come to Memphis so they could assassinate him. So with that being said, let's get back into the documents because we want to put this stuff on record. We were at the portion in the declassified files where now we're going to start talking about the motive. Remember, the whole time we've been asking, why would James Earl Ray want to kill Dr. King? Well, let's see what the FBI investigation came up with, right? What did they say was the reason? And it's going to be propaganda. We already know that. Motive. James Earl Ray, born 1928, was raised under difficult circumstances. His parents were poor, uneducated, and generally resided in areas surrounded by criminal activity. Ray did not achieve a high school education, nor did he attend any vocational institution. After enlisting in the Army in 1946, Ray did not meet the military standards and was discharged in 1948 for lack of adaptability. So we see some type of military background in James Earl Ray's history. That's important. Thus, at the age of 22, he had a very limited education, was not trained or skilled at any particular job, and was a reject of the military establishment. But him, as a lone gunman, took out Dr. King. BS. Thereafter, he proceeded to participate in and be apprehended for a number of criminal actions for which he would be incarcerated for 14 of the next 18 years until his escape from the Missouri State Penitentiary in April 1967. Ray's criminal activities included robbery, forgery, and burglary. He was not known to have been involved in crimes where victims or witnesses were physically harmed. So although he was a career criminal, he hadn't really, he wasn't arrested for assault or battery or harming anybody. He never shot anybody, never killed anybody, never beat anybody. He just committed some robberies. He burglarized a few places and forgery, pretended to be somebody that he was not. Sidebar, FBI files disclose that James Earl Ray has an IQ of 150. Now, we're not here to intellectually shame anyone, but to have an IQ of 150 is a relatively low IQ. So we have an individual who has a low IQ, tried to get in the military, but couldn't cut it, found a life of crime, was locked up 14 of the next 18 years after being rejected from the penitentiary. After being rejected from the military, he escapes from prison in April 1967. He does all of the fantastical things we talked about. Buys cars, has apartments, has hotels, goes to Canada, talks to government employees in Canada, comes back, goes to Mexico, talks to people in Mexico, comes back, buys a rifle, finds out what Dr. King is, stalks Dr. King, shoots Dr. King, escapes. Even though there's literally hundreds of cops around the Lorraine Motel, he somehow magically escapes. Then he gets on a plane and he goes all the way to London. This man with an IQ of 105, who had been locked up more than he was out, does all of this. Look, in March 1968, James Earl Ray was 40 years old and was never known to have had a serious relationship with a man or woman during his adult life. Although he was about to commit a very infamous crime of assassination, neither his childhood, his military years, nor his adult life of crime and imprisonment signaled such action. It's always like this, even with the guys that tried to assassinate Trump. Now, some of you may be wondering, why haven't we got any more information about that guy that tried to assassinate Donald Trump? Well, they do have the information. There's documents on the information. There's files, but that stuff may not be released until our grandchildren. Then our grandchildren will read about what we're living through now. That's just how it goes. That's just how it goes. They're not going to tell you now. They're going to tell you after everybody connected to it has died or is elderly and about to die. Right? That's how it goes. We just got to accept it. His criminal activities were not those of a hired or self-accomplished premeditated murderer. Why then would James Earl Ray murder Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? That's the question that everybody has. Let's see what the FBI, who was involved in the murder, allegedly, let's see what they have to say. An analysis of Ray's prison records and interviews with his prison inmates reveals some probative facts with respect to a motive. For example, in 1955, Ray was incarcerated in the federal penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, for forgery of post office money orders. On September 12, 1957, Ray was approved for the honor form at Leavenworth, but was never transferred there because he refused to live in the integrated dormitory at the farm. So they're sowing seeds of racism, which I don't doubt he was racist. Yes, I'm doubting that he was the assassin. And if he was the assassin, I'm doubting that he worked alone. But I'm not doubting that he was a racist. We have to think back to 1968. A vast amount of white people were racist. But on the flip side, a vast amount of black people were racist as well. The country was split. That's what the civil rights movement was all about. A segment of the white population did not want black people to have certain rights and be considered fully as equal as the white population. And there was a segment of the blacks who wanted to be treated as equal, and they felt like the whites were carrying on the racist ideals of their slave-owning ancestors. So the country was divided. So for someone to tell me that James Earl Ray was a racist, I don't doubt it. Now, I don't know if he was, but I wouldn't doubt it. You know what I'm saying? In 1968, there were a lot of racists running around. We know that. That's not nothing new. Everybody that was a racist didn't try to assassinate Dr. King, no. That's the point. So look, so they're saying that he refused to live in the integrated dorm. Look, a vast majority of white people were against integration. Not just James Earl Ray. Think about it. The whole fight. My father, the great Reverend James Edward Daniels, he tells me that at his school, when they seen that Dr. King was standing up, he was in high school at the time, they protested his high school. And a lot of the black students, they held march outs. I have the newspaper articles. I went and did all this research to put it up so I could verify everything. They walked out of their school buildings to protest segregation. Now, this is just my father. My father tells me about segregation. This wasn't that long ago, family. My father saw segregation. He was born in 1948. My grandfather, who's passed on, God rest his soul, he was born in 1928. 1928 is when James Earl Ray was born. Matter of fact, we're going to get to this, but James Earl Ray, he just died in like 1998, family. This ain't ancient history. I was a full-grown man in 1998. Well, I wasn't in my 20s. Don't get me wrong. I was a teenager, but you know what I'm saying. I was like a fully cognizant human being, aware of what's going on, able to watch the news and discern. In 1998, I didn't graduate, but if I graduated, it would have been around 98, 99. So I was a full-grown teenager when James Earl Ray died in 98. Let that sink in. But look, thus, he was supposedly willing to sacrifice this benefit and its accompanying privileges to avoid association with black prisoners. An inmate with Ray at Missouri State Penitentiary for approximately 3 years stated that Ray hated Negroes. Now, that inmate that told them that, he probably hated Negroes too. Shit. He further stated that Ray had said that all the Negro prisoners inside the penitentiary should be killed. Now, I don't know about that, to be honest with you, but again, a lot of them were racist at the time. And see what we're doing, we're looking at his motives, right? What caused them to kill Dr. King? what they're describing at this point is regular. That's just regularly how a lot of white people felt. Let's just be real. Check it out. He also responded that on several occasions, Ray had said he would kill Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. if the price was right. I think that was BS. In 1966, there was a riot at the penitentiary. 3 blacks were killed. The inmate would not state whether Ray had participated in the killings. He did say that if Ray had not, he would definitely know who had killed the prisoners. He also said that he would not be surprised if he acted without being paid for the killing. It should be noted that another prisoner who was a chef at MSP, Missouri State Prison, and Ray's boss for 6 years stated that this inmate was a good friend of Ray and he also hated Negroes. So the person that's telling the FBI that James Earl Ray definitely hated Negroes, that informant hated Negroes too. A second inmate with Ray at the Missouri State Penitentiary from 1960 until 1965 claimed that he recalls that Ray was glad when President Kennedy was shot and stated that is one nigger-loving SOB that got shot. The prisoner also advised that Ray disliked Negroes. During the time period when King was leading demonstrations and marches, Ray would become aggravated and upset when reading this information in newspapers to the point that he would curse King and the Negroes. He further stated he had heard prison rumors that Ray was supposed to have killed 3 black prisoners at the penitentiary. Now, remember, all of these motives so far are the same exact motives that the FBI would have. Remember, when King was marching, who was beating him with billy clubs? Cops. Who was macing him and the demonstrators? Cops. Who was spraying them down with water hoses? Cops. Who was releasing dogs on them? Cops. So they're saying that, oh, James Earl Ray hated King and he hated the marches. Well, so did the cops. And so did the FBI, because at the beginning of the FBI files, they confessed that there was an active mission to stop King and stop the civil rights movement. So, brother, FBI, these are your motives. You felt the same way that you're saying that James Earl Ray felt. So if you're saying that this is what led him to kill Dr. King, I'm saying that this is what led you to kill Dr. King. Finally, he related that in 1963, Ray made the remark that he was going to get Martin Luther King when he got out of prison. Man, listen, James Earl Ray had 20 years. He had 20 years. I'm going to say that again, 20 years. When he escaped, he had only done 7 on the 20. You feel me? Who would you say Dr. King was even going to be a factor after you served your 20 years? They lying. A third inmate at MSP from 1962 until 1965 described Ray as a lone wolf who never trusted anyone. Now, that's a red flag. That's a red freaking flag. Anytime they describe somebody, I'm going to give y'all the game. Anytime they describe somebody as a lone wolf, that person had help. I'm going to say it one more time. Anytime they describe someone as a lone wolf, that person had help. Generally speaking, when you think about wolves and how they interact and how they hunt and how they live, what do you think about? A pack. Wolves run in packs and they have specific jobs. You have the lead wolf who leads the pack. You have the basically like soldier wolves who are the young males who are capable of fighting. You have the women and children, and you have the elderly. This lone, what the F is a lone wolf? Wolves don't run alone. They run in packs. Maybe a tiger, maybe. Tigers, they're like so solitary creatures. Bears, maybe. Bears are, somewhat solitary creatures, solitary predators. But the fact that they say wolf, that's letting you know that they're casting a spell on your mind. Lone wolf doesn't make sense. It don't make sense. Wolves run in packs. Google it. He stated that Ray was a racist and was heard many times discussing his dislike of Negroes. Another prisoner became acquainted with Ray in 1965 and said that Ray commented if he ever got out of jail, he was going to make himself a bunch of money. And Ray further said a businessmen's association had offered $100,000 for killing Martin Luther King. This prisoner said that Ray did not know what the businessmen's association. A cellmate with Ray in 1955 at Kansas City, who later served prison time with Ray at Leavenworth, Kansas, was also incarcerated with Ray at MSP. He stated that during the period when President Kennedy was assassinated, the movements of Dr. Martin Luther King became the topic of conversation at the penitentiary. Many prisoners heard that businessmen had raised a considerable amount of money, about $1 million, as a bounty on King's head. He further stated that Ray mentioned a dozen times that had he known about the bounty on John F. Kennedy's head and had he been free, he would have collected it. And if he got out in time and King was still alive, he would get the bounty on King. How convenient. A prisoner who was at MSP from 1958 through 1965 stated Ray did not like Negroes and was capable of killing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Ray's psychological background is also a very important avenue of review. As a result of a voluntary psychiatric examination in 1967, Ray was described as having a sociopathic personality, antisocial type with anxiety and depression features. In 1954, a prison sociologist stated that Ray's delinquencies seemed due to impulsive behavior, especially when drinking. These characteristics and comments about Ray support the opinion of psychologist Dr. Mark Freeman. While Ray was in Los Angeles, he was a patient of Dr. Freeman. Dr. Freeman believes that Ray was potentially capable of assassination, was a self-motivated person who could act alone, and likely fantasized on being someone important. There were two matters involving Ray and blacks while outside prison, which shed some light on whether his hatred of blacks and need for importance and profit could have motivated him to murder. While in Mexico in the fall of 1967, Ray associated with a Mexican woman, Irma Morales, in the city of Puerto Vallarta. Morales admitted spending considerable time with him and recalls an incident that took place on Sunday, October 29th. And what the hell is he doing in Mexico? How did he get to Mexico? And why would he come back if he'd been on the run? She and Ray were seated at a table in a bar and were drinking when four blacks and several white persons arrived and were seated at another table. She stated that Ray kept goading the blacks for some reason. Thereafter, Ray left his table to go to his car, and when he returned, he asked her to fill his pocket. Morales did and felt a pistol in his pocket. Ray stated to Morales that he wanted to kill the blacks. He then continued to be insulting, and when the blacks left, he stated he wanted to go after them. Morales, however, told him it was time for the police to arrive to check the establishment, and Ray stated he wanted nothing to do with the police, thereby terminating the incident. So remember, James Earl Ray did go to Mexico while he was on the run. And I believe while he was on the run, he was dealing with FBI handlers. Now, this Irma Morales, she also has an alias that they mentioned earlier on in the FBI files, right? Irma Morales isn't even her real name. And so this whole story could be concocted by an FBI asset. Oh, you know what? I spent a lot of time with him when he was in Mexico. We were at a bar one time. He was getting into it with some blacks. He went and got a pistol. Blah, 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 blah. A second incident took place during Ray's stay in Los Angeles. James E. Morrison, a bartender at the Rabbit's Foot Club there, identified Ray as a frequent customer. Morrison said that on one occasion, Ray became engaged in a political discussion with him regarding Robert Kennedy and George Wallace. Ray became rather incensed and vehemently supported Wallace. On another occasion, Ray had a discussion with Pat Goodsell, a frequent female customer, concerning blacks and the civil rights movement. Ray became very involved and began dragging Goodsell towards the door, saying, "I'll drop you off in Watts and we'll see how you like it there." Ray then supposedly went outside and had to fight two persons, one being black. Thus, it seems clear that Ray openly displayed a strong racist attitude towards blacks. While in prison, Ray stated he would kill Dr. King if given the opportunity, and Ray was prepared to threaten or attack black persons in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, with a weapon for apparently a racial reason. These events and occurrences leading to the assassination of Dr. King and the assassination itself certainly do not illustrate a single conclusive motive. Yet, Ray's apparent hatred for the civil rights movement, his possible yearnings for recognition, and a desire for a potential quick profit may have, as a whole, provided sufficient impetus for him to act and to act alone. I want to show y'all some BS. Let me stop for a second. Let me show y'all some BS. They keep trying to call this man a lone wolf. And even at the end of that sentence, they said that he was acting alone. But they just said, look, in a desire for a potential quick profit. How the hell can he get a quick profit if he's acting alone? At the very least, if he's not working on behalf of the federal government, he's working on behalf of that businessmen's association who put $1 million or $100,000, whatever the bounty may be, on King's head. And if somebody else put a bounty on King's head and he went and killed Dr. King, he was killing Dr. King to get the bounty, and those individuals were in on it. It's like with the rapper Lil Durk right now. Lil Durk is being held because they are saying he paid people to go and try to assassinate Quando Rondo. But when they shot up the car that Quando Rondo was in, they missed Quando Rondo and they hit his cousin. So it's like murder for hire. Murder for hire is a crime. And if there is a murder for hire, the murderer is not acting alone. You see the misinformation. They're trying to say that, oh, you know what? He was probably doing this for a quick profit. There was a bounty on King's head, so he acted alone when he killed Dr. King. How the hell can he be acting alone if he's trying to get a bounty? Who was supposed to pay the bounty? Who put the money on King's head? Did y'all investigate that? You have it in the documents. You say that somebody had money on King's head. Who were they? Who were they? Who were they? That's the question that they don't go into. They want to tell you that James Earl Ray was probably a hitman for hire for some unknown group, but they don't tell you who that group was. Disgusting. Look, sources of funds. Now, this is another interesting topic. because as we've been going through the documents, we see that it seems like James Earl Ray, after he escaped from prison, he had an unlimited flow of cash, buying cars, renting apartments, renting hotels, jumping state to state, jumping from country to country. Where did he get the money from? Let's see their explanation. Sources of funds. Shortly after the search for Ray began, it was recognized that he traveled extensively following his escape from the Missouri penitentiary. Moreover, in addition to normal living expenses, Ray had made several substantial purchases, e.g., cars, photo equipment, dance lessons. These expenditures suggested that he had financial assistance and hence possible co-conspirators. Therefore, the Bureau was particularly interested in determining his sources of income. They need the alibi because they were the ones giving him money. On April 23, 1968, the director advised all field divisions to consider Ray as a suspect in any unsolved bank robberies, burglaries, or armed robberies occurring after April 23, 1968. The results were negative. So they're like, well, maybe he robbed a bank and he just had a lot of money. But if he robbed a bank and he had a lot of money and he made it to Canada, why would he come back? If he robbed a bank and he had a lot of money and he made it to Mexico, why would he come back? But your own results were negative. On April 29, 1968, the director in a teletype to all SACs ordered that all law enforcement agencies which maintain unidentified latent fingerprints be contacted and requested that fingerprints of Ray be compared in order to determine his past whereabouts and possibly establish his source of funds. Again, negative results were obtained. The director on May 14, 1968, reminded all field divisions that Ray had spent a considerable amount of money from April 23, 1967 until April 4, 1968, and advised that a source for these monies had not been determined. The director ordered that photographs of Ray be displayed to appropriate witnesses in unsolved bank robberies and bank burglaries. These efforts and all others to date, with one exception, have proved fruitless. As a result of one of Huey's Locke articles, the Bureau did ascertain that Ray had been employed at a restaurant in Winnetka, Illinois for approximately 8 weeks. That's nothing, 2 weeks. As a dishwasher and cook's helper, Ray had received checks totaling $664 from May 7, 1967 through June 25, 1967. This is the only known source of income for Ray following his prison escape. The only known source is $664. His cars cost more than that. Reports from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police indicated no known robberies or burglaries which could be connected with Ray, nor did Mexican authorities notify the Bureau of any criminal activity which could be associated with Ray. Now that's interesting because earlier in the files, they say he committed a robbery in Canada. Now they're saying that reports from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police indicated no known robberies or burglaries which could be connected with Ray. So where was he getting the money from? He was getting it from the feds. The Bureau investigated the possibility that Ray participated in a bank robbery in Alton, Illinois in 1967, but it was established that he was not a participant. Ray related to Arthur Huey that he robbed a food store in Canada and that an individual named Raoul furnished him funds on a continuous basis for various undertakers. Bingo. So I guess this person who did these articles who interviewed Ray said, well, okay, he did rob a food store, probably for a couple bucks, nothing major. But James Earl Ray himself says the money came from Raul. Remember, Raul is the mysterious character who met with him in Canada. And he said Raul is the one that furnished them with funds on a continuous basis for various undertakers. Do this, I'm going to pay you. Do that, I'm going to pay you. The money was coming from Raul. Raul, FBI. He not fake, fictitious, made up. He's FBI, family. Wake up. These matters were actively pursued by the Bureau, but have never been corroborated by them, nor have they been corroborated by private inquiries of writers or journalists. It is the Bureau's opinion that Ray most likely committed on a periodic basis several robberies or burglaries during this period in order to support himself. So basically the FBI is saying, although we have no evidence, although we have no proof, although we don't have any crimes, we're just going to say, okay, he supported himself. He every so often he robbed somebody, he burglarized somebody. That's how he bought cars. That's how he got apartments. That's how he got hotels. That's how he got to Canada. That's how he got to Mexico. That's how he got the rifle. That's how he just kept robbing. Although we have no evidence for these robberies, that's the explanation that we're going to give. Ray's criminal background does lend credence to this theory. The task force interviewed Ray's brother, Jerry Ray. He stated that to his knowledge, family members did not provide James with any funds. Remember, they already told us that his family was poor. He came from poverty. Jerry admitted he met with his brother 2 or 3 times during his employment at the Winnetica restaurant and advised that he, not James, paid for their eating and drinking expenses. However, when Jerry again saw his brother on his return from Canada in August 1967, James did have some money because it was he who paid for their expenses, which included a motel room. So after he meets with Raul, he comes back, he has money. Interesting. Jerry added that James also gave him his card, commenting that he would purchase a more expensive car in Alabama. So he has a lot of money. He's saying that his brother gave him his car. James Earl Ray gave his brother his car. Like, hey, you take that car. I'm about to get a better car. I'm on now. I'm working for the federal government. I'm on. Jerry stated he was unaware of where his brother had obtained his money, as well as the amount of money he had at this time. Accordingly, the sources for Ray's funds still remain a mystery today because it came from the federal government. So now we're about to look into family contacts and assistance. But before we get into this, I think we're going to end. Let me see how long I've been on. I got a few things I have to do today. I apologize. Look like I've been on right around an hour. So I think I'm going to end it right there at that hour mark. And I'm going to come back with part 6. And we're going to go over family contacts and assistance. But we'll read this first paragraph so we know what to expect. Our review of the files indicated that the FBI had no hard evidence linking James Ray to any conspiracy to kill Dr. King. Absent such evidence, the Bureau apparently discounted the significance of any contact between Ray and his family. As the Chicago case agent told us, it is not unusual for a fugitive or a person who has committed a given crime to be in touch with family members. While such contact may render the actions of the family member criminally liable, it is not generally pursued absent some evidence of direct participation in the crime. So when we come back for part 6, family, we're going to be dealing with family contacts and assistance. And we're going to see how that plays into the declassified files. I'm sorry I couldn't be here longer. I was just trying to get in, drop some information, and now I have to get out. But I thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tapping in. This has been another installment. Happy National Black History Month. It's your brother Matthew Daniels, the greatest author of all times. Hotep, I'm out. Hey, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die.